when we talk about sources, we usually talk about primary sources and secondary sources. Now, primary sources are historical records that are produced at the same time the event that is being studied took place, or soon after. So these primary sources, they're sort of eyewitness accounts. Usually the authors of these sources are living during the event that they are describing, or maybe they're living shortly after the event ended. Examples of primary sources are letters and speeches and government records and tax records and original manuscripts, law codes, news articles, photographs, artifacts. Now, what are secondary sources? They're usually produced well after the events they describe and interpret. Examples of secondary sources are, for example, textbooks and scholarly articles, documentaries, biographies, historical films. They provide interpretation, they make comparisons, and they discuss motives and causation. And in some cases, a secondary source can be also a primary source. For example, if you have a news article from the 1930s that writes about World War I, well, that will be a secondary source about World War I, but at the same time it can be a primary source about the events of the 1930s. Since this article is from the 1930s, we can learn something about the mood of the 1930s from the article. When we analyze primary sources, and even secondary sources, we ask these big questions. Who is the author? What kind of document are we discussing or analyzing? When was the document written? What do we know about this period? Where was the document published? What do we know about the location? Why was the document published? What is the intent? What was the goal of the author? What was his hidden agenda? What kind of language does the author use? Can we detect some kind of emotion? Is the language biased? Can you see some adjectives that will tell you something about this document? What is the intended audience? Who was the author writing for? So these are the big questions that we ask. And once we answer these questions, we can put it all together, and then we can see the bigger picture. And we can deduct some things about the society in which the author lived, or something about the document. The document itself will tell us something about the society. It'll tell us something about the values of that society, and something about the individuals and events involved in the period.